Alright, today's the day I'm actually going to work on the Camry. So I've got a bunch of parts and a bunch of different mods and little trims and stuff I want to clean up on this thing. So I'll dig those out of the boot and I'll run you through what we're going to do. Alright, so this episode I'm going to install a bunch of different mods. So we've got a louver for the back, new set of clips, a dash mat, another mirror because the one I bought and replaced previously actually shakes and it annoys the hell out of me. Tail light, because I smashed this one. I reversed into the truck because I was just moving the car real quickly. Got a master switch for the driver's side because the one that's in it, you have to hold the driver's window really hard up, otherwise it won't move. And then a pair of bonnet struts. I need to sort out a toolkit for the back because I'm sick of carrying this jack around. We've got a visual representation of a coolant leak or coolant situation. We got some BC Racing coilovers, which is way too fancy for this thing. And then we got a set of, I think they're Mazda 3 rims with Lexus center caps that was already done when I got it. And then I googled quiet tires and these were the number one result. So these are Dynamo Street H. So apparently they're mega quiet and apparently they actually perform pretty well as well. Ranking higher than some of the Pilot Sports, the older Pilot Sports obviously. So I'll chuck those on as well. We'll lower this thing, we'll clean up some things. I want to get tint and all that stuff as well, but that might have to wait for a later episode. Alright, I'm going to start with the boring stuff. I'm going to put in some bonnet struts and I'm going to put in this master switch. So I won't bore you with the details, I'll just get it done. Well, they work, but I've got a bad feeling because these are exactly the same as those ones. So these ones obviously didn't last very long, because they actually have been replaced before. So we'll see how long this lasts, I guess. Alright, really quickly, I have replaced his tail light, which is the broken one. But also, I assume since it's broken, but the back is also broken. And it's full of water. It's of course not running out now, there you go. So cracked and full of water, so that can go directly into storage. And then this guy is the master switch, is cracked all the way along the plastics, but it does work, so I might keep it aside just in case the same thing happens to that one. So I'll keep that. Then these guys, which are the Monroe Max Lift, which is exactly what I ordered. These ones were what were in the car, and they do have some resistance in them still, but not enough for the bonnet. So I'm going to keep these as well. I'll just put them back in here and just write like not new on there or whatever. But this is the part number if you are curious. So that's 3 jobs off the list. What's next? So we got the dash mat in. Probably going to need to stick it down or screw it down or something because it is going to wobble, I can tell already. I've got the tabs on here all stuck down and ready to go. I cannot get the red tape off though, so that's going to be fun. So I'll deal with that later when I'm a bit more patient. Got this tail light replaced. Got the back window cleaned and ready to go. Got this mirror replaced. And I really don't have much faith in this one not wobbling either. But we'll see when I start driving it again. So door cards all back together. Dash pad, dash mat even. And then the bonnet struts are all done as well. So now, onto the fun stuff. I'm going to do wheels and coilovers. Alright, so I know the back is going to be a pain. So I'm going to start with the front and jack it up and try and get the ball rolling. And get the front done, get it on the ground again, and then we'll jack up the back and try the back. Because most of the interior has to come out before the back ones. Alright, so these are my new BC Racing BR coilovers. So they have 6 kilo springs in the front and 3 kilo springs in the back. They're pretty soft in the back, so we'll see how we go, but I did want to keep some ride comfort with this thing, so I didn't go for anything too solid. So with my particular model of Camry, the sway bar is actually mounted to the lower control arm, not to the strut. So I'll probably be able to ignore those, which is pretty good. Another thing to mention is these are actually for a XV20 Camry, and mine is an XV10. So they don't actually list a coilover for the XV10. So I'm hoping that these are the same. I did a bunch of measurements at the wrecking yard and a bunch of measurements on my own car, and it should work. But pretty much this is a bit of a research thing. I need to tell BC if this actually works so they can list them correctly on their website. I believe they'll be right, but there's only one way to find out. So let's jack the car up, take the wheels off, and jump into the front. All right, so once you have your car on jack stands, I'm not your mum, so you should listen to me. And take the wheel off. So we've got 5 lug nuts on this thing, which is weird for me because I like 4-stud cuts. So I'll rip them off, and then we can start dismantling the strut. There's normally 2 bolts on the bottom, a couple bolts on the top. It's normally pretty cruisy, so let's smash into it. Alright, so on the Camry, the brake line is just held on with this little plastic clip just over the front, and then there's this bolt back here. So that holds the brake line. We're going to need to undo this bolt here and just take that clip off. It's a 12mm. And then I'm also going to have to undo the bolt underneath that, which holds the ABS. That one's a 10. Alright, so the next step is a big bolt here, and there's another one just there. So they're 22mm on the bolt side and the nut side on these things, which is super handy. So I have a 22mm spanner, which is for O2 sensors, but it does fit on there nicely, and I have got sockets, obviously. Just move the ABS line out the way and remove the bolt. Then to make this a little easier, normally you can just reef on that, and that's the bottom half of the strut, nice and free. Alright, the next job is to open the bonnet. Good thing I replaced those gas struts. 3 bolts on the top here, which look to be 14s. 3 bolts out, bit of wiggling, and the strut will come out. Alright, and here we have the BC coilover, which we're going to put in, and the old manky strut that we've taken out. So normally run your eyes over this sort of stuff, make sure that all the measurements match up, and everything looks the same. So the BC coilover comes with 3 new nuts, so take those off, and then feed it into place. Alright, so the next job can be a little bit tricky. You need to line this up the correct direction, push it all the way back, then you need to take the knuckle, stand it up a bit, feed it into the gap where it's supposed to go, and try and get the bolts in. So it can be a bit fiddly. A jack or a second person can be a big help. So another little tip that I like to do is put the bolts in from the front. So if something comes undone, it's not going to rattle its way out as you drive. It's, at worst case, hopefully going to stay in there if the nut comes off. So I always put stuff in from the front. I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but it's always worked for me. And I'm going to need a jack because I haven't lowered the other side yet. Does anyone else use their leg to operate the jack when you need to use both hands? Alright, so one thing that I found that hasn't quite lined up yet is there was a second bolt for this guy down here on the original strut. On this, I'm assuming they want you to drill that out and just sort of thread the bolt through both. So I'm probably just going to bend that open and chuck a cable tie on it. But that's the only thing that has failed me on the front. So BC leaves this little hole here for you, so you can just clip in the original plastic on both sides and it holds it there nicely. Alright, so the only thing left to do now is to put the wheel on, and I already know that these wheel nuts aren't going to work because these are the shank style, so I'm going to need to get some new wheel nuts. But for now, I am going to put these on, so don't judge me, I'll fix it later. Alright, so I haven't got a lot of clearance on the inside here. This is the first time I've had these wheels on, so I'm probably going to need to get a small spacer, which we all know I hate, but probably going to need a small slip-on just to get that a little bit further away from the strut. I'll see if it's a problem first and then deal with it later. Same with the wheel nuts. I'm going to fix those before I drive the car. These aren't good, they look like crap as well, but they also will rattle loose eventually. So let's do the other side, get this thing on the ground. Alright, everything's tight, wheel nuts are horrible, let's chuck this thing on the ground. I did notice that the brake caliper is actually very close to the wheel. It doesn't touch, but with that and with the strut, I'm going to need a little spacer, which is a pain, but I'm going to need it. So let's get this thing on the ground. This is the out of the box height, so we'll see how low it is or how high it is. I need to still deal with my driveway, so once I get on the driveway I'll lower it some more, but Now it's probably going to be a little bit jacked up. It's much better, but it's still kind of high. So I'll turn this thing around and then we'll do the back. All right, so I've got the car spun around the other way. So I'm going to jack this thing up, chuck it on some jack stands and take the wheels off, and then we'll see what we're working with. All right, so conveniently, the front and the back on a front wheel drive are reasonably similar. So we've got the brake line to take off, we've got the ABS sensor to take off, and then in the back we actually have a sway bar to disconnect, and then the two main bolts. So it's pretty simple, and then there's only 3 at the top, or 2 at the top. So let's jump in. That one's a 12mm. That one's a 10mm. All right, so the next thing to do is, once you've got these 2 lines off here, is to take the sway bar off. So these can be a little tricky. So there's an Allen key on the inside and there's a 14mm nut on the outside. So grab yourself a 14mm spanner, grab an Allen key that fits. You should be able to hold the Allen key still and undo the nut. So I've got an Allen key, I'm not sure what size it is. I think it's probably a 6mm, and then the nut is a 14. So grab those 2 tools, put the spanner on, put the Allen key in, and then you should be able to push up on the spanner and undo that nut. They can be pretty annoying sometimes. Then just use the open end of the spanner to work your way off. So sometimes the sway bar link is actually fused to this bracket here. So if that's the case, get your nut most of the way off, get it past the threads, and then just give it a little light tap with the hammer and it should pop free. In this case, it's actually very loose and nice to work on, which is quite weird. That's it. You got 2 more nuts down the bottom, and then the ones in the boot. All right, so the back 2 bolts are a 19mm on both sides. So I need to grab a spanner, then we can undo this thing. All right, so that's down the bottom done. Now, the next thing is to pull the whole interior apart to get to those top 2. So that's gonna be a pain. I'll jump on the other side, get it to this stage, and then we'll get that parcel shelf off and undo the nuts. All right, so I kind of hate pulling interiors apart, so I've just done it off camera. So the bottom part of the seat has 3 big clips across the front. You just need to give that a good old tug on this corner in the middle and the other corner. Then there's a 12mm bolt down here to take this padded section out. Then once you're there, there's a plastic guy here, so just pull that straight out, and there's a little rubber around that, so just pull all that out. And then a little clip and a screw up there. And then what you need to get to is this strut top in here, so it is pretty awkward. I'm hoping not to take it apart any more than this, but we'll see how we go. And I just need to get those 2 bolts undone. So there's one there, and there's one just around the corner, which is pretty hidden. So I'll get those out, and then the strut will pretty much fall out. We can put the coilover back in and put everything back together. All right, so it turns out I was actually wrong. There is 3 bolts on the top hat. So undo all 3 bolts and then chuck the new strut in. All right, so I got the big 2 bolts down the bottom there, tightened up. These 2 just here, and that guy. So that's all back on. The wheel is ready to go on now. And then just got to check the strut top bolts inside and put the car on the ground and do the interior. Alright, so I've only got 2 more jobs to do. Job number 1 of those 2 jobs is to stick this louver on. So I just got Emily to peel these bits of red tape off so that it's nice and sticky, because I had no luck with that the other day. So we're going to stick this thing on the back and then undo those 4 clips that we've stuck down, take the tape off the rest of them, and then stick the whole thing back on again. So I'll cut back in just a second. Alright, and just like that, got it all stuck down. Emily's much better at peeling double-sided tape than I am. It took her no time at all. So, old man spec engage. Next step is wheel nuts and lower. So I need to get it over to the concrete over there, and then we can do that. But it was going to be another day. That's why I didn't lower it in the shed. Alright, it's Friday. There's only 1 job left on the Camry for now. I've got a bunch of jobs I want to do later, but for now, let's lower this thing properly. So I want to come at least 2 inches lower in the back, I reckon, and then probably another inch in the front. see how we go. I probably need to be a bit sensible about it because it is supposed to be a daily, but I'll see how we go. So I'm going to jack the car up and adjust the coilovers. Alright, so before I adjust this coilover, I'm going to take a measurement from the center of the wheel to the wheel arch, and then I'll know how much roughly I want to take out. And then you've got to take into consideration the motion ratio, so that's the distance between here and where your actual suspension is. So the suspension, you might only move at 20 mil, which might move this 25 mil, or it might be the opposite. So I'll take a couple inches out of it and see how we go. Alright, so we're starting with 365 mil from the center to the arch. So let's jack this up and see how much lower we can go. Alright, here we are looking at the coilover. So all you need to do to lower this thing, try not to touch the spring if you can avoid it, and these two collars here, you just want to crack this one open. Maybe just wind that up a little bit so it's out of your way, and then you just screw the coilover by hand down. So with this case, the back of the coilover is actually solid 40 mil of space between the bottom of the coilover itself and the bottom of this section here. So I'm going to come a bit past that, so I'll just sit here and wind that down until it comes out the bottom. Then another way you can do it is measure from these top locking collars, which you're not going to move, to the bottom of the locking collar, so you'd call that 14 centimeters. So I want to wind this up, which actually brings the car down. So I'll start winding and I'll get back to you in a couple of minutes. Alright, so I've done a bunch of winding and now that's at about 90 mil, so I've taken 50 mil out of it, and then we've got about 15 mil hanging out the bottom of the coilover there. So that should be 50 to 55 millimeters. So I'll put the wheel back on and chuck this thing back on the ground and make sure that the distance from here to the arch is about 50 millimeters less, and then do the same thing on the other side. Alright, first hurdle. Now that spring and the whole top half of the shock is lower, the wheel hits the spring. So that's not going to fit without a spacer. Sometimes being a hoarder pays off. So luckily I found a pair of 10 mil spacers. Main problem is that they're 10 mil. They only just clear steel and there's like no thread left for their wheel nuts. So I will not be driving on this setup. I mean, I'll move the car around and stuff, but I'm not going to be driving on the road. So I think I need other wheels. That's a bit of a pain. I'd like to get these tyres, obviously. So I'm going to need to find some more 17s that are going to fit a bit better. So that's a bit of a pain, but let's lower the other side, get this thing on the ground for the final reveal, and then deal with that later. Alright, I've only lowered one side, but I'm going to put down, do that measurement again, which will obviously be a little bit off because the car's not going to be completely level. See where we're at and see if I'm happy with it, and then I'll do the other side. Apparently that's 50 mil lower. Doesn't really seem it. Wheels are kind of aggressive now with a 10 mil spacer, which is not what I was after. But even in jumping on the back of here, it doesn't actually seem very nice. I don't know. I'll lower the other side 50 mil and we'll see where we're at. Alright, so I've got the back lowered. That's sitting pretty good. It's on the spacers at the moment, which I don't like. And I jumped on the tow bar and I was like, this isn't moving very much, and it's kind of making a bit of a weird noise. The guard is just sitting on the tyre. So I either need to roll the guard or lift the car up, neither of which I'm doing right this second. And the wheels don't really fit, so that's heaps annoying. So I think I have to get other wheels. For now I'll probably put the stocks back on, but that's it lower and it looks much better, but I can't drive it. So I should probably lower the front an inch or so while I'm here, and I'll go get the stockies and put them back on, unfortunately. But I'll lower it all first so you get an idea of what it's supposed to look like. And just for reference, from the center of the wheel to the arch is about 320, so we did take 40 to 45 mil out of it. So that's pretty good. I think it would probably go a bit more, but obviously it's sitting on the tyre. When I put the other wheels on, they'll be a bit skinnier, so it should sit a bit lower. Alright, so the front's measured at 370 and 360, so that's a bit weird to start with, but I'll measure everything on the inside and we should be sweet. I'm a bit bummed about the back, but I'll get stockies on there and it should roll fine. So for now, let's lower this front. Alright, so getting in here, measured from the top of this guy to the bottom of this guy, it's about 64 mil. So if I go to 44 mil or 45 mil, that's a 20 mil drop. That should be about all I need in the front, hopefully. So I'll do that on this side and the other side, and then we'll see how it looks. Alright, so I decided to go 25 mil lower, so instead of being 65, this is now 40. So that's pretty much as good as it's going to get. I'll chuck the wheel back on, everything should still clear on the front, and then I'll do the other side, chuck it on the ground, see what's hitting. Alright, same on left as on right. Everything measures up the same. I'll chuck the wheel back on and see how it looks. Alright, well that's much better. So the front's probably a little low. I don't know, we'll see. The back's pretty much where I want it, but it is sitting on the tyre, so it's probably a little low as well. But I think that looks a whole lot better. Just need to get some tyres and wheels that fit now. And I want to use these tyres because they're the quiet ones. So I have to find some rims that actually fit. For now, I'll go get the 15s and see where we're at. And we've taken about 25 to 30 mil out of the front. All right, that does look pretty good. So I need some plus 40-ish offset wheels, 6.5 plus 40, or go a little bit wider rim and fix the offset with that. Looks pretty good, but yeah, I'm gonna have to put the stockies on it for now. Only in the back though, the front actually fits. So I'll chuck some stockies on the back like a super sick Commodore driver or Falcon driver. All right, so back on the stock wheel here, plenty of room to the coilover, which is kind of weird. These are only a 15.645 with a 205/65 15 tire, and those ones have a 215/50 So I'll chuck those numbers in the computer in a minute, but we'll make sure this fits first. Plenty of clearance on the stocky. By plenty I mean enough to move, but not heaps. All right, well it looks like a Commodore with the mismatched wheels, but it doesn't scrub anymore, so that's nice. And it fits okay, so I'll have to deal with that for now and come up with a solution later on. But I'll show you on the computer what the offset problem was, and then I'll have to leave it there for this week. All right, so here's the website I was talking about. So it's called willtheyfit.com. So you put in your existing stock wheel size, and then you put in your new wheel size. I definitely should have done this before I bought tires. So then you hit calculate, and we've got all of the specs here. So the rolling diameter is pretty similar, which is what I was after. Circumference is pretty similar. Poke is pretty similar. The inset is about 15 mil difference, which is the ½ inch that the rim is wider. Then it actually gives you a bit of a preview here as to where your wheel's going to sit in relation to the current one. So we know that I needed a 10 mil spacer on the back, so that would change the offset by 10 mil. Hit calculate again, and now you can see that it clears like it did before on the car, and then the outside actually gets pushed out a bit. So I'm going to fiddle with this and try and find some different wheels that fit a bit nicer, but this is a good tool if you're trying to fit wheels on your car. All right, thank you very much for watching this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed Camry mods, slamming the Camry, how to put BC coilovers in, whatever I call this thing. It's looking a whole lot better, but I do have a bunch more mods planned, just tint and like a stereo and stuff. So stay tuned for that if you like Camry stuff, and if you want to work out what I do with these wheels. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.